Welcome to the next episode of Serving Spirit, a show that helps provide spiritual healing for the mind, body, and soul. My name is Connie Smock, also known as Connie, Warrior of Light, and I am thrilled and honored to introduce my next guest, Peter Woodbury. He is a world-renowned psychologist and past life regressionist. And there's many reasons why I'm excited, which we're going to dive into this. But Peter, if you can please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you kind of get started in all of this.
Sure. I'll try to be brief. My great-grandmother was a medium, and she was 100 years old when I was born. And she was like my grandmother. She lived till I was 7 to 107. And I remember she used to have like imaginary, playmates. That's what I thought. Like she would speak to spirits. And it just made me really curious. And both my parents were psychiatrists, and they didn't tell me she was crazy, nor did they completely believe everything. They just said there's lots in the world that we don't understand. And that just set the tone, I think, for me to be really curious in psychic phenomenon. And then eventually I found out about the work of Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce would use hypnosis to get into deep states of trance where he could access, for lack of a better word, universal mind. He could answer health questions. He could answer all sorts of questions. And I was also a psychotherapist, so I began to do advanced training in hypnosis and eventually studied with Brian Weiss and started to apply hypnosis for past life regression and what I call now regression hypnosis. That's pretty much the focus of what I do now. I practice regression hypnosis with clients, and I also teach it. And it's a process where a person moves from their conscious mind into their subconscious mind, which can tap into what I call the soul mind. And tapping into the soul mind, you get in touch with the parts of you that have always been and always will be. So that's where you might tap into past lives, but you can also tap into, sometimes people communicate with their guides, they communicate with deceased loved ones. Sometimes they have dreamlike experiences that are symbolic. So I've just found that it's a very, very helpful experience for people. And it's not driven by me. I don't, when I start a session, I don't really know what's going to happen. I've just learned to trust the process, and that what I say, the psyche naturally wants to heal itself, that the soul wants to come into the consciousness of the individual and help them with whatever is going on in their life, mentally, physically, spiritually. And in my experience, it's been very, very helpful to people. Whereas when I was a psychotherapist, that was helpful. Talk therapy is very helpful. I've been in talk therapy myself, but it's kind of a slow process. And sometimes it's a very long process. But I find that with hypnosis, you're really able to accelerate the process, that you're able to move through emotional, physical, spiritual landscape much quicker than you can with the conscious mind. So in a nutshell, that's my background somewhat in what I do currently.
That's incredible. As you know, I believe in all of this stuff too, and everything helps, especially to help us heal, because that's why my belief is that's why we're on earth, is to evolve, and we're placed in all these experiences to help us do that. But I feel some people maybe are not aware that that's what's going on in the experience. So it feels very personal to them, and it can feel very personal. So how would you say that this can help with in a past life regression? In your experience, how has this helped people to be able to heal and move forward?
Well, just following up on what you were saying before, I would say that, we talk about the new age. So there must have been an old age. Like, what's the old age? What's the new age? And I would say in the old age, or the previous age, we would seek the doctor, the healer, the Jesus, the Edgar Cayce. It was outside of ourselves. And Jesus and Edgar Cayce said, greater things can you do. And I think the new age is about us gaining access to that directly, that we don't need, we still have to go to doctors sometimes, but there's more and more healing that's available to us from within, from our own healing resources. What Jesus could tap into, what Edgar Cayce could tap into, we can learn to tap into ourselves. It's not going to, it take practice to get to that level, but that pathway is open to all of us. And then to follow up with your question about how is a past life regression helpful to someone? Well, as a psychotherapist, like Sigmund Freud said that most of our kind of issues are rooted in childhood. So we have childhood patterns and issues that come up in families that become patterns in the rest of our life that we deal with. I think Sigmund Freud would have loved past life regression because it's the same belief, but it's going beyond childhood. It's saying that we have had previous lifetimes and that we're not incarnating as a blank slate. We're incarnating with a particular agenda of strengths and challenges and a purpose that we're here to work through and work with. And so oftentimes we get puzzled. Like sometimes you might think like, I don't even have any memories of this from childhood. Like, why do I have this pattern? Like, I'll give an example from my personal life. I have an older sister that for some reason I've never trusted, and I didn't even think it was a problem. I thought people that trusted her had a problem, not me. Like I knew not to trust her. And so, years of talk therapy, it never came up. It just wasn't, I just kept my sister at arm's length. But I went to Brian Weiss's training and we did practice sessions, and I saw myself being in an orphanage, but being raised to be a priest in Ireland. And the person regressing me said, well, how'd you get here? And I saw myself as a 7-year-old boy being dropped off at the orphanage. And I went and looked at who was dropping me off, and it was my sister and her husband. And right away, I knew that I said, it was like an insight. I said, no wonder I don't trust her. I'm still holding this grudge against her for having left me at the orphanage. But what happens in a regression is that we're non-local. It's no longer just Peter. It's Peter in his soul self. So I was able to feel her feelings. So I was able to understand that she had 12 children and she couldn't feed all of them. And they thought that I was the one who could survive. They thought I was the strongest. That's why they made that tough decision. I didn't know that as a little 7-year-old boy. And I also gained the insight that this was Ireland. It was a famine. It was happening to other children being dropped off at orphanages. And in a way, it was the way the Catholic Church, did their business of having priests and nuns. I still have Catholic karma, born Catholic in this life. But all of that, I came out of that regression and I called my sister almost right away because it had dissolved. Like I realized I had this unconscious grudge. I saw why it was. I had a deeper understanding of it and was able to let it go. It doesn't always go that. That's just one example, but that's an example of how we can hold something against somebody unconsciously and how if it gets revealed to you and you see it on the soul level, that it can heal itself. Like sometimes I'll say that our injuries happen at the personal level, but healing happens when we can move into the oneness. When I can hold compassion for my sister, understand the times, and that it's not all about me. My sister wasn't out to hurt me. She was in a challenging situation of her own. But I could give other examples too, if you'd like to hear. That's just one of many.
I love to hear the examples because I think it also creates awareness for people to understand why they have conflict with certain people currently in this lifetime, right? And how the past lives can play into that. So that's if you have another example, that's great. I think it's awesome.
Sometimes this has happened a couple of times. The pattern is it's a woman who has a husband or an ex-husband that's extremely toxic, that they've divorced, that they're trying to get away from, and they just don't understand what's going on in this relationship. And sometimes they'll see a past life, like there's a soul commitment to this person, and they'll see a past life where they were even worse. And so it shows them like, okay, they're making progress as bad as they are in this life. They didn't kill me like they did in the last life or this whatever else is going on. So sometimes we have soul contracts with people that it's helpful to understand. Not that we have to, never meant that we stay in abusive relationships. That's not what soul contracts is about. Sometimes soul contracts are about setting boundaries and limits with abusive people, which we should do because that's good for that people need to face the results of their actions. So that comes up sometimes. I talk about this case all the time. You probably heard about it. The man who came to see me because he had chronic laryngitis, like Edgar Cayce. And I took him into my process, and I have 3 doors. And he went to the first door. He opened the door, and he saw a man with a spear. And this was early on. Like, I didn't understand how the psyche works. So I was like, nobody's paying, I'm going to, what kind of business am I going to get? People see a man with a spear. So I said, let's go to the second door. Second door, the man with the spear. I was thinking, I was seeing rainbows, unicorns, like Egypt, And to go to the third door, like, I didn't get it. Man with the spear. He had to deal with this guy with the spear. Mm-hmm. So since it was early on, I didn't really know what to do. So I said, I just kind of scrambled, and I said, why don't you just sit down? There's a bench right here. Why don't you let it come to you, like, to feel out what's happening? He was quiet for a little while. And then he said, oh, they're showing me what happened. This guy speared me in the throat, and I died with this anger and this resentment, and it's energetically lodged into my vocal cords. That's why I get this chronic laryngitis. But they're also showing me, like, the karma, why this happened. And they're showing me what happened afterwards, that it was actually a good thing. It all has resolved itself. So now they're telling me that I need to relive the death. I need to get speared by this guy, but in peace and in love, not in anger and resentment. So I said, oh, go ahead. And so he said, yep, it's happening. I'm taking it in a loving sort of way. It reminds me so much of Jesus, like, forgive them for they know not what they do. Sometimes I think, maybe that was the first person, Jesus is like, to hell with all of you. And they're like, cut. And then Jesus, come on. And then the second one, he's like, oh, forgive them for know not what they do. So it was a little bit like that. Like, his first version had anger and resentment, and then he could re-experience it in a way to correct it. And he's been in touch with me, and he's never had a recurrence of this laryngitis. So that's another example of
that's
a physical
incredible
experience. Yeah.
So not only can you heal emotionally from past life regressions, you can also heal physically from the things of the emotions that you're hiding or keeping inside that are stuck.
Yeah, and it's it's hard for me to, like, my advertisement is like, somewhat, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, it's not up to me. Like, I wish you'd be healed, but it's up to there's what a person wants consciously, and there's what the soul wants to express. So I'll tell a person it's like their soul is pregnant and wants to give birth to something. And it may have to do with what you're seeking, or maybe something completely different. And again, I'm not in control of that. It's just a process of revelation of that. And so sometimes people come in and they're curious. I'm open to anything, and they get something quite out of the box. Or sometimes a person comes for one sort of thing and they get something else. Or sometimes it's usually in alignment with whatever is troubling them. But it's like what I found is the soul realms, as a psychologist, I call it the unconscious realm. As a spiritual healer, I call it the soul realms. It is so wanting to help us. Like, it's just so there. And it's just like, it's almost like people live on the first and second floor of their consciousness, the physical and the mental level. And there's this attic that is full of treasures. It's full of gifts and blessings. And it just wants people to, open that door, walk up to the attic, and you won't believe, like, the energy and healing that's there. But every person has to do that themselves. Every person has to initiate that walk. And then what I find, people do in meditation, and I feel that a regression is a type of meditation. You're going into meditative states, but it's being guided through with the regressionist. So they structure it to get you into a higher state of consciousness. And then my technique is then I guide you there, but once you're there, I try to listen, as opposed to trying to go to a different door if I don't like what the door is. Mm-hmm. We open the door, whatever's there, I assume that that's what's most needed for that person to deal with. I do give the suggestion, because hypnosis works with suggestion. I give the suggestion that behind this door is whatever's going to be most helpful for you. And then we open it, and sometimes it's a traumatic experience. Sometimes it's very, very painful. But what I found is that people have buried traumas. And in psychology, we would say when you try to bury your feelings and you shove them into the basement, all they do down there is lift weights, and they get stronger, and they need to come out. Our feelings need to be felt. And regressions are very, very emotional. And I'm gifted, or I've developed the ability to be very comfortable with intense emotion. So people can tell that, when they're having an intense emotional reaction, I'm telling them, good, let that come forward. And that's so much not what we hear in the conscious state. Usually when we cry in the conscious state, people are uncomfortable. So they say, oh, it'll be okay. There, shove this Kleenex up your nose. We're not comfortable. In a regression, you want to enhance this emotional release. And usually it resolves itself. Usually something is revealed as they're releasing the emotion, they can see through to it. One client one time told me, he said the tears that we cry, they clear our eyes so that we can see. So many of us with clogged emotion, we can't quite see, we can't quite feel. And so we have to clear that out. So I think that one of the great benefits of a regression is the emotional. It's not a cognitive process. You're not thinking your way through a regression. You're feeling your way through it.
That's incredible. When you tell me the stories, I literally get chills throughout my whole body. It is.
Well, I'm excited that you're going to be taking the class soon,
I
because
am.
everything I'm talking about, it's right now, it's just telling you, but you're going to experience it. Like that's the course is designed not intellectually. Like right off the bat, I'm going to regress one of the students so that everybody sees what this work is like. And then you're going to practice. So you're going to regress someone and see what that feels like. And then you're going to be regressed and see what that feels like. So you're going to do that 3 times. And after doing it 3 times, you have a pretty good idea of what this work is about. And you'll be able to do it if you so choose. A lot of people take the class just out of curiosity or personal development, which is fine. But many people take it to become practitioners, and the course is designed for that type of person and that kind of development.
I am super excited for it. I mean, you can ask my angel team. That's all I've been talking about. I can't wait. When is it?
Good.
September 17th. I'm so excited.
You'll get to regress all of them too.
I know. And I had done past life regressions previously, but I had stopped doing them for a while because I really want your training and I want to go deeper. And I really feel like this is just going to be, what I need. So definitely super excited. So, real quickly, while we're on this subject, how can people reach you for this course? Because I'm super excited about it. I think that, everyone should experience this. So how can they reach you to be able to take this course, or how can they sign up or get more information?
Well, they can just go to my website, which is my name.com, peterwoodbury.com, and they go to my schedule, and then they'll see the outline of the whole course and the dates and the times of it. And then they can email me. My email is on there if they have questions, or they can pay and register, and they're in.
Awesome. Are there any prerequisites or requirements that someone has to do in order to take this? Do they have to be a medium? Do they have to be a psychic?
No. It's designed for anyone who has an interest. One of the optional prerequisites is to have had a regression, but over the years of teaching, a lot of people come without that. And during the course of the class, you're going to get 3. So you'll be plenty regressed by the end of the week.
Are you sure you're ready for this, Peter? You don't know what you're signing up for.
Well,
have you met me?
I've done intensive courses, and I don't try to work with demon releases or releasement, but it's come up sometimes, and those have been really kind of crazy.
Well, luckily that's not me. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, I'm ready.
That is not me.
I've learned to be
not that I know of. We'll see. I don't know.
Well, I remember doing it. It was in person. It was about 10 of us gathered around in a circle, working with each other. And this woman, her voice changed. It's like, oh, everybody's like, the room got colder. Everyone's kind of scared. They're looking at me, and I'm giving everybody a thumbs up. And I proceeded. Once the session was over, I was like, oh my God, that was horrible. I was terrible. I was so scared. They're like, really? You looked fine. I said, of course. I was gonna. What, you think I'm gonna let this demon know I'm scared? I gotta fake it till I make it.
That is awesome. And just so, to help our viewers and listeners and whatever, that isn't something that's typical, I'm assuming, or anything like that.
No,
And
no.
and it's
I
obviously
think,
something
yeah,
needed.
you develop kind of a specialty, like you start to attract experiences to you. And there's people that will like to work with spirit releasement, or what we used to call exorcism. And so there, God bless those people, and I send people to them. But I found that sometimes it comes up in group settings. Like I think in a group setting, it's the more people that are holding space in a spiritual, prayerful energy, the more that spirit, and it's not like the model of casting a spirit into swine and having the swine jump off a cliff. It's just guiding, talking to the spirit to go to the light, that it's time to let go of this individual and move on. And as the individual spiritualizes themselves, lower energy vibrational spirits are no longer attracted to them.
That is a great point. And doing these things in different modalities helps to increase that vibe. So
Yeah,
anytime you do something.
and I do every session with like when I teach the class, I'm very happy for students to adapt it to their style. Like if they've taken other classes, if they've taken Dolores Cannon's training or other people's trainings, they can take something of what I've done and adapt it. I really think that the best hypnotist or regressionist is the one that the person is, not some kind of stamp that they become who I teach them to be. But what I do encourage, and it's kind of the dogma of my class, is that I think the work to be safe has to be done with prayer. And we have to realize that when you're doing regression work, you're making transitions in consciousness, and from here to where we want to get to, you drive through some dangerous neighborhoods. And so I find that prayer is just like locking your doors. You just go to that. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just that's just my process, and I've learned it from Edgar Cayce that prayer is very important, and in meditation or any transition of consciousness work.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
And it
We
doesn't
always
have to
start off
be.
there.
It doesn't have to be out of the Bible. It's just, to me, my prayer is basically good stuff here, bad stuff there. Umbrella of light and protection, the highest and purest with us. Anything less outside of that circle. That's my prayer. But if somebody resonates with Jesus or Buddha or whatever they want to bring in, they can do that, as long as it resonates with the client as well.
Totally agree. Quick question. You know how sometimes you see these TV shows where all of a sudden they, count to three and all of a sudden they're out and they don't remember anything during that session. When you're doing the past life regressions of the hypnotherapy, what are there different levels of consciousness per se when you're doing this?
A great question. There's a range of hypnotizability. So 80% of people are mild to moderately hypnotizable. 10% roughly are difficult to hypnotize, and 10% are highly hypnotizable, people that are very easy to hypnotize. And when you go to a show, like when you go to a stage hypnotist, let's say you see YouTube, you just see the hypnotist with like 6 or 8 people. What you don't see is how they've culled the audience. So what they'll do is they'll begin to make suggestions to 200 people. And what they'll do is they'll say, and you're relaxing and your head is dropping. And you might be like, nothing, but you might look to the right of you and you see someone whose head is dropped. That the hypnotist knows that those are the highly hypnotizable people. So the ones with the heads dropped, they bring them on stage. And then they can do their show with these highly hypnotizable people. So when you're working with people, the first time you work with somebody, you don't know if they're going to be difficult to hypnotize or very easy to hypnotize. And so in the induction process, you learn about how does this person work with suggestions. In a class, the class tends to draw people that are pretty easy to hypnotize, because it's not the regular population. People that are drawn to learn how to be hypnotized are usually spiritual people that have some background in some spiritual practice, and all of that helps them to enter trance states. But when you're out there working with the general public, you're going to see that range. You're going to see people that are more difficult to hypnotize. And we'll cover this in the class, but generally the engineer type, I call it the muscle bound left side of the brain, someone that is very physical sense oriented. You have to see it, you have to feel it, you have to touch it. Because a regression is imaginative. It's you have to get comfortable with the imagination. Like Cayce said, anyone with a good imagination can be a good psychic. So sometimes people, like I remember working with this one guy, and I was asking him to describe what he was seeing. He says, well, I see like purple swirls, and there's a little blue in it. And I was like, oh, he was describing what he was seeing in his eyelids. He wasn't having a sense of seeing with like the third eye or something. What I'll do in a case like that is I'll have somebody remember something, remember what you had for breakfast yesterday. And they can describe that. They'll say, I can have eggs. Can you see that? I said, yeah, I see the plate. They don't realize that that's imaginative. Like a past life memory is stored in the same place that your memory about yesterday is, last week. And so sometimes you have to work with people in that sort of way. You go backwards. You help them get comfortable with just memory imagery. And then that can tap into something that doesn't quite feel completely like a memory. So with all that said, though, also hypnotizability is a skill that develops with practice. Like since I've done so many sessions and I've been hypnotized, I'm very highly hypnotized. I didn't start off that way, but it's just with practice, I can enter trance states easily. And so people can, if they're hard to hypnotize at first and they stick with it, they can eventually, like Brian Weiss, it took him like 30 sessions. He was so left brained. It took him 30 sessions to get a breakthrough to seeing and feeling something. And then the other type of experience, a person that has a little challenge, is sometimes somebody with a trauma experience. And they just need some help trusting. But I find that working over Zoom helps with the trust and the safety. When I used to, imagine I'm a guy, somebody comes in and meets me for the first time, and I say, lay down on this couch and close your eyes. Who does that? Like, that's not a natural process. So some people are going to be kind of like, I don't know, who is this guy? Is he safe? Is he not safe? And sometimes people have had bad experiences with hypnotists. Some hypnotists are not ethical. So, but I found that working over Zoom is, it helps people go into trance easier and more quickly because they feel more safe. That's one of the reasons. I was very skeptical of working over Zoom at first. And back when I started, there was only Skype, and Skype wasn't as stable a platform as Zoom is. So Zoom is very, very stable, and people have very significant deep experiences, sometimes even more than they would in person.
Yeah, that's incredible. Even with the mediumship, I noticed there's no difference with the quality, whether they're in person, other than, I can hug somebody, that more of the personal experience. But in terms of,
there's a different, it's not, I don't know if one's better than the other. But sometimes I say I like in-person sessions better, and clients like Zoom sessions better. It's so easy. They don't have to drive anywhere. They don't have to park, all these things that happen.
And feeling safe. I love how you said that. They feel safe. I mean, some people like to get out to get a different ambience or to get the energy of the person.
If they don't feel safe at home, maybe you want to leave home.
Yeah. So it's a good mix of the two.
And pets, like people have their pets. Pets are so helpful during sessions. Instead of being intrusive, sometimes they bark. But I also require people to wear headsets. And that blocks extraneous sound. They can just hear my voice. And it also goes into both sides of their brain to get that bicameral stimulation. And they can adjust the volume to what that suits them. So there's so many conveniences about working over Zoom. You'll see it in the class. Like when you teach over Zoom, you have those breakout rooms. So I can put two people in a breakout room, and they're just like having their own individual Zoom session. And then I pop in with an assistant every so often, observe, and people can ask for help, and we come in and observe and guide whatever we need to do. So it's a very like when I teach in person, it's hard to find so many rooms for people to work in privately. Whereas on Zoom, you have that so built in. Sometimes when I used to teach in person, we'd put like 5 pairs of people working in one large room. And it would be like one person over here is sobbing, they're dealing with some trauma. Someone over here is laughing, it could be very distracting. Still effective in a way. But there's lots that I like about working in Zoom.
Yeah, me too. And again, I can't wait. I'm super excited. Okay. When you are in the hypnotic state, or someone is in the hypnotic state, you mentioned like dogs barking or something. Can they still hear it? Are they still conscious or aware of what's going on? And I would imagine there's different, like you were kind of explaining a little bit before, different levels of people being, of how they can get hypnotized.
It depends when the sound comes. Like during the induction is it's like a guided meditation. And the induction is to take a person from the waking state into different to mild, moderate trance states. And if a person is in the trance state, one of the signs of trance is what's called decreased peripheral awareness. So you're watching like, oh my God, that's my mother and stuff. There could be a siren, there can be somebody shouting, and you don't hear it. You hear it sort of, but it's just you don't pay attention to it. It's out there somewhere. Like I used to work when I traveled, I'd work out of hotels, and sometimes the person was in a deep trance, but I could hear the cleaning people and cars, and they'd be like so into it. And I'd be like trying to hear them. So sometimes I would get more distracted by the noises than they would. And I'd ask them afterwards, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, I could sort of hear there was a siren, but it didn't interest me. I stayed focused on what was in front of me." But then, I'll have some sessions where there's so much synchronicity. Like when I worked out of hotels, I would have somebody for a 2-hour session. You could hear a pin drop. So quiet. It's just the most peaceful session. Then the next session would come. All of a sudden there would be road work happening. The cleaning people were clamoring in the hallway, like lightning and thunder. And it would be like, wow, to me, it was like, there's something different about the energy of this regression. There's something drawing this energy in. Sometimes they could tune it out, or sometimes it would be distracting for them. So the more you can, if you work in person, the more you can work in a quiet setting. Of course, it's going to be conducive to the experience.
What is your craziest story with your experience that you've had, if you don't mind sharing, with hypnotherapy or with the past life regression?
I used to teach the course like I do now. I teach a main course, introduction course, and then I wanted to teach people even deeper. Like we would do an intensive. An intensive would be 10 people regressing each other like in a round robin. So let's say you were in the class, you would regress Mary, and then Mary would regress Tom, and Tom would regress John, and we would go around, and those would get so intense. Like the energy would be so heightened. I remember one time this guy was doing an intense release, and he was just like screaming, just absolutely screaming. But of course, synchronistically, we were doing it at a place where I used to work. It was a Sunday morning. Nobody else was in the building. So he could scream and be unheard. Like if it had happened on Saturday, they probably would have called the police. But since it was Saturday, and we worked through it. People were uncomfortable because it was so intense. But what's great about a regression is that during the intensity, that's not where the session ends. It usually resolves. And so I don't remember the details of that one, but he had a lot of trauma in this life and past life that he was needing to work through. And one of the things I like about Edgar Cayce is he says the spiritual path is full of emotion, that there has to be a lot of crying, that crying and feeling is spiritual. And that it talks about, it's from the book of Revelation. It says that we're built to absorb the expression of emotion. And we're not going to drown in our tears, that they actually nourish us. And what our bodies aren't built for is the suppression of emotion. Suppressing emotion makes you sick. Releasing emotion can be very, very helpful. So I've had times where another time, I think I mentioned this a little earlier, I don't advertise that I do spirit releasement, what used to be called exorcisms. Mm-hmm. Just not really an energy I want to draw to myself. But sometimes, spirit uses me. And it was another intensive. And, we opened up the session and the person's voice changed like, oh, and it scared everybody, and they were looking at me, and I was just like, and I just proceeded to do something and help the spirit move on. And once the session was over, I was like, oh my God, that was so intense. And they were like, really? You look like you were so comfortable. I said, are you kidding? I was faking it. Like I was just doing it. I
Yeah.
didn't want the spirit to know that I was terrified. So I just kind of had to impose or express a kind of security. And, it worked out. So I remember that was sometimes sessions where there's a tremendous release. You want to talk about astrology? I have Pluto on my ascendant. Pluto's the underworld, the unseen, psychology, hypnosis. And so I love intensity. I couldn't stand a job where I had to do the same thing every day. I just like, tell me your deepest, darkest secrets immediately. It's great professionally, maybe my personal life would be another story, but that's my nature. And so I really have enjoyed being present with people with the expression of deep emotion and healing. And so I can bear witness with people with that process. And over and over, it's shown itself to me to be healing. Like I have these kind of quotes that I've created. And one of them is that the psyche naturally wants to heal itself. That I think a person comes in sometimes kind of handicapped, like they're just operating as a body and a mind, and they have all this stuff that's going on that they don't understand. And once they open themselves to spirit, which is what hypnosis does, it takes you into the subconscious soul realm. There's a flow in of healing energies. And sometimes it has to remove blockages. So sometimes the blockages are unexpressed emotions. Like I'll say, sometimes people get emotionally constipated and they have to feel. And a client one time told me that the tears that we cry, they clear our eyes so that we can see. And I really believe that the release of emotion can be very, very productive and very helpful. And then, of course, also people move into, like with that session with my sister, they move into a oneness view. And so whatever they're seeing themselves or their relationships, they can understand it not just from their own perspective. Like they can understand their mother's view, they can understand their husband's view or daughter's view. And then that is also healing. It's a compassion that helps us too. So there's always three components that I look for in a regression: that it's emotional, that it is experiential, it's not cognitive, but like the person is right there, like a virtual reality. Like they're saying, "Oh my God, this is happening, and this is happening." They're not thinking about it; they're witnessing. And the other is that there's an element of oneness, that there's an element of moving outside of themselves. And over time, the specialty I've developed is helping people connect with their guides. It's very easy for me to get people to communicate with their guides. And I find that it's when I used to just do regressions, sometimes after regression, a past life regression can be like a dream. Like you see all these things and you're not sure how it applies. So you kind of have to interpret it. Like, I think this person was your mother. Sometimes they'll see it, they'll experience that, but there's an integration process. When you get your guides, they just tell you, they just direct. They're like, this is happening. This is why this is that, the other thing. And so it's almost like, I guess, more direct or less symbolic, more direct.
Have you ever had someone be a celebrity, like in a past life, or like in the near Jesus, or
Yeah, amazingly not a celebrity, but having had encounters with what we call celebrity. Yeah, so certainly people that had heard about Jesus or present at the crucifixion or had heard him speak sometime, and it made such an impression on them that they carried it forward into this life. So I'm trying to think of, I remember one woman was a librarian at the burning of the Library of Alexandria. And it was really interesting because she was so angry that the library was burning, and she said we should never keep important information in paper. And guess what she was doing in this life? She was putting everything onto computers. She was taking literature. Yeah. And so she had kept that promise. Trying to think of other, but I've never, people think, oh, everybody's Cleopatra,
It's the example I gave earlier. I'm like, can multiple, do you believe in multi-dimensions? Can like multiple people be Cleopatra maybe in another life?
Well, I would change that just a little bit. Mm-hmm. What I think that happens because I've had a couple of regressions where people have intense experiences of Mary Magdalene. Very like it's them, and it's been a couple people. What I think, this is my interpretation, it's not been validated, but I think that at important junctures like that we are in now, when in between the changing of ages, you come to, are you familiar with the word Akashic records? I'm sure you are. Yes, I think the Akashic records, according to Cayce, is it's like each of us have our record, like all of our past lives are like, you could think of it as a book or however you want to think of it. It's recorded. And I think that the Akashic records are open right now. By that, I mean that you can experience Jesus's life, you can experience Mary Magdalene, you can experience Cleopatra's life without necessarily having been that person, but you can go into there. Like I can read a biography of Caesar and I can learn about Caesar's life. It's intellectual. But can you imagine if I could go into the book of Caesar and first person experience Caesar, like that virtual reality? That's what I think happens. I think that, and the life, like Mary Magdalene is such an important archetype for our age. Like I think Mary Magdalene represents the suppression of women and the knowledge and the gifts and talents of women that has just been pushed down. And I think she's like, now's the time for women to just bust out and express what they know and down with the patriarchy. Because, Mary Magdalene apparently was, during Jesus' life, she was like an apostle. She was equal. But once he died, the patriarchy came back in. Once he died, they were like, I'm sorry, you're a woman. Jesus treated you like an equal, but you get out of here. We're now, men are going to take over now. So you can imagine the frustration that she felt. Well, I've experienced that. I've watched that in regressions. And I think that's why it's coming up now, because women, that Mary Magdalene energy now can really be expressed for women to say, we're here, we're smart, we're teachers, we're gifted, get over it, get over it, men. We're going to walk side by side. We're not going to be in the shadows anymore. So that's that's my intuition about what it is. Because we're all one. Like in a way, we're every soul, we're every experience. And we just kind of go in little different directions. But isn't it wonderful now that we can experience each other in past lives in a oneness?
It is very interesting you're bringing up Mary Magdalene, because probably about a week ago, someone had said, you should try connecting with Mary Magdalene because I feel like she has something to say. And I just got chills again. So
she has so much to say.
There are no coincidences.
I used to lead tours to Egypt, and Isis is so strong right now. Isis has so much to say. Even I was getting messages from Isis.
I love that.
Same Isis. Isis is similar to Mary Magdalene. It's about the divine feminine coming into power. Power, maybe that's not the right word. Coming into expression.
No, I agree. I think it's all very, very exciting. In terms of bringing forward attributes, you mentioned that right now the Akashic records are all open. So let's say if I needed strength, maybe I felt weak in some area, whether it's in relationships, can I use past life regression to go in and tap into, let's say, somebody who I think was very strong in a lifetime, to be able to absorb or bring those attributes back and integrate those with me to help me in this lifetime?
Yes, with a caveat. I think that the ego is very insidious. And so a regression works best, hypnosis works best when we set the ego aside. So if someone says, I really want to tap into Mary Magdalene's energy and experience, you have to be careful is that ego or not. I would encourage someone to be more open and say, you know what, I want to tap into the strength and the courage that might be available to me in opening myself to spirit. And then if Mary Magdalene comes in, that's wonderful. But if some other energy comes in that can fulfill that, that would be like I've done personal regressions where I wanted to see if I had had a past life with Edgar Cayce. And, I saw something, but I remember it didn't feel as pure as when I've just gone in open and I just opened up to whatever came through. So that's where I said, there might have been some ego in wanting to particularly find out a past life with Edgar Cayce versus just wanting to be open to whatever would be most helpful for me at this time. So that's the only caveat I would put. But if somebody says, I feel that there's past life energies, maybe even archetypal energies that I'd like to activate from my subconscious soul mind into my conscious awareness, then I'd say, let's do it. Let's explore that. Let's be open to whatever might come. And who knows, maybe it's going to be Athena, maybe it's going to be Thor, it might be some other energy that might, maybe that, we've all been everything. We've all been men, we've been women, we've been every race, color, every saints, we've been sinners. So we can a woman can tap into powerful past lives as a man. A guy can tap into past lives as a woman. My experience with that, though, is that women tend to tap into past lives as women, and men tend to tap into past lives as men. And I think it's because of the karma that when you're a woman, you're dealing with the issues from past lives as women, even though you've been male. If there's male energy that needs to come into consciousness, it will. But I think more often a man is dealing with what he's done as a man and is repairing and healing in this life as a man. But a woman is dealing I think this is one of the first generations where, women haven't been treated as property. And so there's just a lot of energy for women that can be tapped into in the subconscious I think sometimes we see a lot of that angry energy, and there's nothing wrong with anger as long as it's channeled in a constructive sort of way. And we don't get stuck in anger. We use anger towards a purpose or something of meaning.
So how does free will play into karma and fixed events?
Yeah, I think that I think both exist. I think there's fate and free will. And what I would say is, like, say, you may have a soulmate, right? And you're fated to meet at a party. So you're at a party, you kind of catch eyes with somebody, talk, you dance, have a drink or two. That's fate. Free will is, what do you do about it? Do you ask for each other's phone number? Do you follow up on it? Or are you too shy and something makes you not activated? Well, lo and behold, next day you're riding the bus. Oh my gosh, there's that soulmate just happens to be on the bus. Maybe then you activate it. But I think fate puts us into situations, and free will is what we do with it. So let's say, for example, a person might have fate or karma with an addictive pattern. So the person may come into this life with the addictive pattern and become an addict again, or they may become an addict and then become a sponsor. Like, they may work through it to help others. So there's lots of our fated kind of experiences aren't our destiny, that we have free will to work through what the karma is. Like, you may have a soulmate that you're fated to work with, but maybe in this life it's to be stronger, to stand up to them and not fall into a codependent narcissist pattern. So that's how I see it working, that both coexist.
And what about multi-universes and or dimensions, or the layers or different dimensions? How does that play into the past life regressions?
Well, the only experience I have with that is like, again, with Edgar Cayce and his ability to go into deep trance. Let's say you're you're just out of college and you have a job offer in Ohio and you have a job offer in California, and you're weighing the two out, and you take the one in California, and then your life goes on in California. You could ask Edgar Cayce, what would have happened if I took the job in Ohio? And he said, oh, you would have met this person, you would have this, you would have had this pattern. He could show you that pattern. And maybe there would have been like overlap. Maybe it would have been, no, you were destined to go to California. So you would have been sent to California. That's where you would have met your soulmate. So I think that my take is that we have lots of junctures in life, choices to be made, and we follow one. There's an energetic possibility that went down a different path. I guess on some level of consciousness, you can experience that. But I think that, the bold line are the choices that we make. But there's also, etheric lines of paths that we didn't take that might be interesting or curious to look at if we wanted to. But I think sometimes we circle around. Like if we took a left turn and it was really better for us to take a right turn for our soul development, we might circle around after a while and get back on that path.
So there are no mistakes, is what you're saying.
That's interesting. Mostly not. There's mostly no mistakes.
Mostly. So what about the times that are the mistakes?
Well, again, it was Edgar Cayce. He said that that there's just so many moving parts in creation. Sometimes things don't, it's like amazing. It's like everything that has to go on in life, it's like a 99.9999999% accuracy rate. And like an example was, he said that this parents asked why their daughter was born blind. And Cayce said it wasn't her karma to be born blind. There was a malpractice from the doctor who delivered her, used the forceps and blinded her. He's created that karma for himself. But with your daughter, she has a different opportunity than what she came in for, and help her to use this experience as blindness for something to use for spiritual growth rather than resentment. So that is just an example of supposedly a mistake that happened. There was another one that came to my mind. It'll come back to me.
No, that makes sense. Because a lot of times people will ask, well, this happens. So, obviously there's a reason for it. And what's the reason? But I guess there is still at the bottom line is there still is always a reason for everything. We just may not understand it at the time.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like our free will. And it's not that the one path that we're on is permanent. Like we can evolve, we can change. Like a relationship, we can outgrow it. We can have a pattern of staying stuck in toxic relationships, and this life might be about learning how to break free of those and so standing in your power. I see that a lot. Sometimes people will say, oh, it must be my destiny to stay in this type of relationship, but I don't believe that. I'm just
okay. You mentioned in the Akashic records, you could, because they're open, you could live someone's life. Let's say Cleopatra. How would I know the difference if I really truly was Cleopatra, or if I'm just reading her Akashic record or the blueprint of her life?
You wouldn't know.
Oh, okay.
It would be the same. But you would just notice, like, I'll give you a strange example. I remember I was in Florida. Strange things happen with hypnosis. I was in Florida doing a regression out of a hotel. A woman comes in on Tuesday, and I'm doing my induction, which involved a field of grass. She interrupts me. She says, it's not grass, it's wheat. And I'm a little girl running through the wheat. So I followed her, and she went on and told a story of a woman who became a prostitute in the Old West. And she had a customer who started teaching her how to read. She learned how to read, and she quit, and she got a different job. Really nice experience. So then a couple of days later, a woman comes in. I'm doing the induction, and I'm at the grass. She says, it's not grass. It's a field of wheat. I'm a little girl running through the wheat. And I'm thinking, is somebody playing a trick on me? What is this? And she goes and she tells a story of being the same story, that she was a call girl, a prostitute in the Old West. But this time she made friends with a teacher who taught her how to read. in learning how to read, she changed her life. These two ladies didn't know each other. Both of them had such an experience that was so helpful for them. You know, I was left wondering. I was just like, did they open an Akashic record? Was it one person's life and the other person read it too? Did they both need to hear that story? Was it a third person? Like, did I do the regression over a gravesite and they tuned into somebody else's? But what was really important was that both of them experienced very similar life, and it was personally very, very healing and important to them. And they both experienced it as if it was present, as if it was their own.
So many things come to mind with that. One of the things is what we focus on, right? What we become aware of, we open ourselves up to the creation of something. I'm wondering if there are a few different things going on. Could it be that this helped one person, so you attracted another person who also could be helped by the same scenario?
Possible, yeah, certainly a possibility.
The other thing is, obviously, Edgar Cayce is one of your guides, because you are working through him very personally.
Mm-hmm.
And another option could be he is directing this as well to be able to pull this experience in to help with very similar backgrounds and maybe live the same life, or maybe a different, with the whole dimension, maybe all the above.
Yeah, and I think that selfishness, egocentrism are very low vibrational states of consciousness, and spiritual levels of consciousness are empathy and compassion. And what is empathy? Empathy means I can feel you. Compassion means I can walk in your shoes. So while we're on the earth, I can have empathy and compassion for you. In a way, I can try the best I can to feel with you something. What about on the spiritual level? We have that even deeper, so we can go into somebody else's feelings and experiences completely wholly. Like here we do it. I'm still aware that I'm Peter while I'm counseling you and I'm crying with you because I'm feeling it. But on the soul level, it's just like there's no boundary. Just go into it. If it's helpful, if you're doing this in a prayerful awareness, you're asking your guides for help, and they say, you know what, here's a life that maybe not quite yours, but it's something that's going to be really helpful. And in the oneness, they're all ours. We think of ourselves as so separate here. Once we move into here, we're all one. And so it's like we're going to go into the oneness that's you, that's going to be helpful to you. And you think, well, that's not my personal. It might not be your personal past life, but it's your collective past life. We've all had these lives together in some way of consciousness. Like we're all connected. And I think that you're here, and to go to a past life, you just kind of go to the oneness, and then you go over here, and you can go over here. But what separates us from going to each other? Like when Edgar Cayce was asked, how did he do a reading for a physical ailment? He said, I tap into that person's subconscious mind. So he would go from his mind to your subconscious mind, read it, and then give it to you. Like he was doing like your homework. Like you could do it if you learned how to do it and tapped into understanding your dreams. But Edgar Cayce had that ability to move into the oneness and read other people's subconscious minds. Sometimes a little bit of a glass of wine helps to make this make more sense.
No, I love this. And of course, I believe in all of this, and I'm with you. Excuse me. In terms of astral projection, and how does that play in with the hypnotherapy, or how are they different and how are they the same, and how can you access that?
That one, I haven't had experiences with people because it's not the focus of it. Hypnosis is a tool, and it's like a screwdriver. You can use it to stir a drink, or you can use it to tighten a screw, whatever you want to do with it. And hypnosis is a tool. There's just really one hypnosis and many applications. So you can use hypnosis for weight loss or smoking cessation or past life or guides, or you could use it to facilitate out-of-body travel and that sort of thing. So that hasn't come up. I haven't had people do. I mean, I've been in conferences where we've practiced remote viewing and that sort of thing. So I do believe that that's a possibility, but it isn't the hypnosis application, it's not one of the hypnosis applications that I use.
And how many sessions would it take, generally speaking? I know everyone is different, but let's say I wanted to, I don't know if you mentioned smoking. If I was a smoker and I wanted to try to quit smoking, typically, can it be done in one session?
Well, I don't use hypnosis for that type of application. Like I don't really use it for smoking cessation, or in my psychotherapy practice, I'll use it for other purposes than regression. Like I'll use it for behavior change or pattern change. Of course, sometimes people have asked me to apply it, and you just have to learn a different script. But it depends on the person. It's like let's say if a person wants to quit smoking, how really committed are they? Like I remember early on, there was someone who basically wanted to tell his wife that he had tried it. He had no intention of quitting smoking. And so he's just like, that's not going to work. So it'll work if you really, really want to do it. And then it can get you over that hump to change that behavior. But sometimes it can work once. Hypnosis works with repetition. So one of the things I do in that type of case is I make a recording for someone. I record it on their phone, and the natural trance states are at sleep. As people are falling asleep, they can listen to that. These applications of hypnosis are what I cover in my life coaching class. So I teach a regression class, which is really focusing hypnosis for regression. Then in the life coaching class, I'll teach applications of hypnosis for different types of purposes.
Oh, okay. So there's a difference with that. So thank you for sharing that. So
Sure.
people can sign up for both then? And do you
Yes,
have
I offer a bundle. It's something like $875 for the individual course, but $1,000 if you take both. So I really encourage people to take both. And it's fun for people to see each other, like to become a cohort, so that the same people take both courses. And then there's it's a fun feeling when you're seeing people that because the regression class really builds intimacy and trust. Like people stay friends forever, many of them from the class. And then when they go into life coaching, they've already built that sense of camaraderie. That's very helpful for the class. And it's fun for me too, to have people that know each other and are familiar.
So as far as what you may have tapped into with your own guidance, as well as with what maybe some of your patients and or clients have tapped into, you mentioned the golden age or this new age coming up. What can we expect? Is there what's going on?
It's going to get worse before it gets better. So that's one of the things I'm really focusing on in my teaching, is that I think that the next 10, 15 years are going to be rough. And I think that it really behooves people to develop inner resources. As an example, when we had the stock market crash in the 20s and 30s, people jumped out of buildings for suicide because they were so identified with their money and they saw no hope without money. And I'm hoping that the karma now is that if people lose money, if they lose property, that they've built a sense of identity that's beyond just the physical. So that's what I'm trying to help people. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I think it's, a birth can be a big challenge. Like a birth can be traumatic in some ways. And I think that we're having to birth this new age. And I think that existing power structures don't want to let go of power. So there's going to be a breaking of that. I take a lot of this from the book of Revelation, the prophecy that's there. And I think that there's a guy, Edgar, who wrote the book, the Jungian analyst, the archetype of the apocalypse. And he talks about that there's nothing more valuable right now than a few people that understand what's going on. And so I think from plumbing the subconscious, I want to help people tap into that, tap into what's going on and what they can do to prepare. The preparation isn't to build a bunker and buy an Uzi. The preparation is to turn within, to access the resources that you have within yourself and to find security in that time. Like I remember like the pandemic was sort of like a little mini glimpse of things. And some people struggled terribly during the pandemic, and some people thrived. Like for me, the pandemic was a wonderful reset. I stayed home and meditated and did a lot of stuff online, and it was a real period of spiritual growth for me. But it's I had the resources to be able to do that. I was blessed. I know many people lost family members, and they lost. It was hard time for them. But I think that just like I did during the pandemic, I tried to help people understand what was going on so that they can go through what's going on in a more peaceful state. Like that guy with the throat. It's like we can take a spear in the throat and fear, or we can take the spear in the throat and understand what's going on. And that changes everything. So if people look at my offerings, my courses this fall, it's a lot about helping people tap into these times that we're living through and learn how to do it themselves, not just reading a book about it, but starting to get your own inner guidance. Touch on the elephant in the place that speaks to what you're here for and what you're here to be part of.
Well, I hope I can find my receipt for that Uzi, because I'm kidding, of course. No, I totally agree with you. And I do feel that this is pushing us into basically moving from fear to love, and not having attachments to things, and how to be lovingly detached from, we are not our body. We are not this house. We are not these things that are all around us, and to really tap into that inner self. So I
getting there, and getting there is a process. It's not like you just all of a sudden click your hands and you're like, oh, I'm a spirit being. I'm okay with violence around me, and I'm okay with having no money. It's a process to get there. Where years ago I was in a dream study group around the Book of Revelation. I remember seeing I was on the top of an apartment building, and it was like a park on the top of this building, very high building, and nobody knew that they were at the top of the building. It was just like they thought that was the world. Off in the distance, I could see these storms coming, like cyclones. My first thought was like, "Oh my God, I got to get out of here." And then the Morgan Freeman voiceover was, "No, stay where you are." And that's stayed with me ever since. Where whatever changes are going on, I'm going to trust that I am where I need to be. And if I'm in the middle of the hurricane, I'll be in the middle of the hurricane. If I'm not, I'll just be present with where I am. And I've felt that sometimes when I've been in situations that have been a little scary, and that peace has come to me, of that I'm just where I need to be.
And if it's your time, it's your time.
Yeah, I always say I'm not gonna fear death till it's happening.
Right. That's a great rule to follow, or to live by. And I know, because I often think too, like, where's the fine line between self-defense if somebody's trying to harm you? Do you just say, this is my time, or do you shoot back? Do you?
Oh, I think everybody has to answer that for themselves. I don't think there's anything wrong with self-defense, but then there's also nothing wrong with, very high soul. I mean, I'll tell you one story. Do you have time for a story?
I do. As long as you have time, I'm good. Yes. I could go on for hours. So you tell me.
Okay. Edgar Cayce had these groups that came through him. They were called Search for God groups. And there was one in Massachusetts where I used to live. And I joined the group, and they were impressed. They kept talking about this young Indian fellow that had been in the group, who was such a gifted, beautiful soul. And somehow, I remember the story was he was somehow related to Mahatma Gandhi. He was in Boston for a master's degree program or something. And they just said, he just was not normal. He exuded such a loving light. And they said one time he told us this story. He said he was walking through the Boston Common, which back then, the Boston Common was a dangerous place to walk through at night. So he was walking through the Boston Common at night. And he said two guys accosted him with a gun. And they said, give us your money. And he said, oh, okay. And he opened his wallet, and there was like $40. And he gave it to them. And he said, but come with me. My bank is like, like a few minutes away. It's right there. Come with me. I can get you more. And they're like, what? And like, you must need the money. Come with me. I can get you more. I think I can withdraw 200 from my bank. And they're like, what? No, no. And so they ended up running away from him. And he's like, where are you guys going? Where are you going? Stop. Come on. I can help you. I think of that story, like, what a soul, what a choice to make. I don't think that I would do that, but it just, to me, it shows that you can get to a place where you have just so much empathy and compassion that here you are being robbed, and you just see the need in this person, and your heart opens to them, and you want to help them, as opposed to kill them or fight them or run away. So it's I hold that as a beacon of some state of consciousness I hope to achieve someday. Like, sometimes I'm in a strange situation and I'll think, like, would I do that? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong sometimes with self-defense, or we all have to make that choice. But like, when you ask that question about, what do we do? What can we do in these situations? That's just a very high possibility for a human.
Yes, I'm a karate girl, so I'm with you, Peter. I would be whipping some. I'd be opening up a can.
Right. You're not going to the ATM, are you?
No, I'm with you though. I would love to be to that level, and who knows?
Well, I'll add to this story, because I remember one time I went to a lecture, and it was by a woman monk, and she had gone to an intense training with this Zen Buddhist monk, and she said, sometimes we'd go for walks, and he'd see a homeless person, and he'd look at him and he'd say, "You lazy guy, you just go get a job. What's wrong with you? You could do it. You should just do the job." And then she said, next week they'd walk around, and there'd be a homeless guy, and he'd like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? How can I help you?" And she said, I couldn't see anything different between these two guys, these two homeless people, but he could discern a difference between what their motivations were. And so I think that, can we get to that place where, if we're being robbed, do we sense like, oh my gosh, his children are sick, he can't afford the medicine, like that's what he's motivated, versus, or somebody who's just some other reason that they're robbing people. Like, I think if we had that insight, we would respond differently to whoever's in front of us. And of course, at moments of fear, when we're afraid, our psychic ability goes away. It's more like we're more locked into the physical. Our physical body takes over. But I think if, let's say, with this Indian fellow, he didn't go into fear. He stayed in his oneness attunement, and he picked up something from these two guys that touched him, and he wanted to help them.
What great insight. That is incredible. But it's also
maybe another situation, he would have given them a karate chop. He would say, "No, you guys are scoundrels."
Yeah, because maybe that's their life lesson to learn. That of what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Say, look, the $40 is enough. Take that and go. I'm not getting more.
And two, it's also of letting go. It's just money, right? Money's just energy, and if we focus on that $40 and
think about, like, you've probably noticed this. There's been times where somebody's needed something, and I'm like, and I give them more than I have, and 2 weeks later, some money comes that I didn't expect. So there's just, like, it says in scripture, all gold is mine. It's like that. If we give in love, it comes back to us.
That's a great way to look at it. Thank you for saying that. If we give in love, but if we give out of resentment, then that's a different energy, and we may get a different experience being pulled or attracted to us because of what we're the energy that we're emitting or giving off.
Probably one of the several really important teachings that I take from Edgar Cayce was that he said, attach to the intention, not the results. He says the results are in God's hands. You can just control your intention. And I remember it helped me because I used to have what I called like Hamlet's disease. So let's say I'm in line and someone ahead of me can't pay they're $5 short. I would be there like, oh, should I help them? Oh, maybe I shouldn't help them. What if they take it wrong? Oh, and by the time I'm Hamleting, going back and forth, they're done, And now I go like, I want to help them. I'm going to say, oh, look, there's $5 on the floor here. You must have dropped it. That's what I would do now. And not worry about if they resent it or not, that's not my business. I did it in the right vein. If I did it like, oh my God, they're clogging the line, it's taking so much time. Here's $5 and get out of the way. That's a different energy. That's not gonna. They may resent that, but if I can do it from a place of love, they're more likely to receive it from compassion. So that's what I believe. One of the things I really learned. I just, if my heart's in the right place, I do it. What happens out of that, I can't control the outcome.
And another great way to look at that too, because I've heard of that, of even giving to homeless people, because I've heard people say, oh, a lot of these aren't really homeless. They have more money than I do. And so interestingly enough, if you come from a place of love, and it's their karma, I guess, right? Or like you said,
discern, you can discern. Like I remember one time I was at a 7-Eleven in Boston. I was just parked, drinking my drink. And I saw a woman there asking for money as people were going in and out. And every now and then she'd pull this wad out of her sock. And she'd had the money. Must have had like $200 or $300. And so, I think she was going to use it for drugs.
Yeah.
But then, some people say just give the money if they use it for drugs. That's for them. I read one time a guy said, well, if I give them and they use it for drugs, well, I probably would have used that money for drugs myself. So they might as well use it. Or somebody would say, I might have, by drugs, they might have said I might have used it for a drink, or I might have used it for some pain killing too. So I think those sort of things everybody has to figure out and discern. I think discernment is so important. And I think discernment is a spiritual gift where you don't see everything the same. You see people differently. The ability to read people is really important. And I think it is a byproduct. Trance work, it's a byproduct of spiritual development where, you meet somebody and you can pick up, this is somebody I like, this is somebody I could trust, or like, I can't get away from this person fast enough.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You automatically either want to be in someone's energy field or.
Yeah. I can look at someone's picture. Like, let's say somebody's just been hired to run an organization I care about. And I'll say, I wonder who they hired. I'll look at their picture and I'll be like, I wouldn't hire this person to walk my dog, let alone, and then sometime later, they all find out that person wasn't the right person for that job. But I think we can develop these discernment abilities.
What's interesting is I have taken a photo of someone, and at one point of their life, or my life, whatever, however you want to view it, and I looked at the person, I was like, oh, I could see like darkness. They seemed very like intense. And maybe 5 years later, I look at the same photograph and it's like rainbows and like very clear. And it's so interesting how a picture, right, says 1,000 words, right? Yeah. Of the energy too. So very interesting that you bring that up. I agree with that. Thank you so much, Peter. This was amazing and incredible and very insightful for me. So I'm sure it's going to be very insightful for many, many, many people here watching this. How can people reach you either for a personal session or for a course? If you can please let us know again, what's the best way to reach you?
Probably the easiest way is just to go to my website, peterwoodbury.com, Wood and then Bury. And then go to services or my schedule. And there's my email address and everything I'm offering. And then if people have questions, they can just contact me. And I'd be happy to hear from anybody who's interested in the things I do.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Peter. And everybody watching, have a magical day and night filled with peace, love, and light. And until the next one.